Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of our Maintaining Virtual Wellbeing podcast. I believe we're on episode 5 now at this point. My name is Jason Bates. I am the productions head at WMTU. I am joined by a couple guests you may recognize from last time and a few new ones as well. If each of you would like to take a turn introducing yourselves, I would very much appreciate it.
I'm Laura Putwen. I'm the Assistant Director of Academic and Community Conduct.
And I'm Officer Ryan Wakeham, Michigan Tech Public Safety and Police Services.
And I'm Whitney Boroski. I am the Manager of Student Health and Wellbeing.
So in our last podcast episode, we talked a lot about the Good Samaritan Provision and sort of what it was, how we can use it, and those sort of things. That sort of is more of an introduction to the Good Samaritan Provision in general. And in today's episode, we'll be looking at a little bit more in depth now that we have a couple more people who are sort of involved in the more holistic view of what the Good Samaritan Provision enacts and what is involved with it. So in case you're curious, the previous episode will be linked below. So if you're curious and you want more information on what this is, feel free to check that out before this episode, just so you can be up to speed on what all we're going to be discussing here. So just as a quick recap, let's go over first what the Good Samaritan Provision process looks like from beginning to end. We talked about this a little bit last time, but now that we have 3 people who all sort of work from different aspects on this, I'd love to sort of talk about what each of your roles are in this process so we can paint a sort of holistic picture about it in general. So Whitney, let's start with you. What is your role in sort of helping out with the Good Samaritan Provision? What advice can you offer here?
So I work in student health and well-being, and what we really try to focus on, my team and I, is really looking at through the prevention lens of things. So we really want students to be aware of what resources they have and to be able to use them if they find themselves in a situation where they need help or see that others are in a situation and they need help. So when we talk about the Good Samaritan Provision specifically, we really want to make sure that students are aware that if they see something that just doesn't feel right, or they're afraid for their own safety or their peers, that there is help that's available and there is help on campus, and we want you to call instead of someone getting hurt. So that's how I really work with the Good Samaritan Provision. Of course, with Laura and Ryan in their offices, we generally try to look at the whole picture, right? If we look at it in segments, I don't think a lot of work would really get done with the Good Samaritan Provision. But as far as how I look at it, it's through the prevention lens. And we really want those students to call if they have a question or if they're concerned about something. And really what the Good Samaritan Provision is summing up, and what we talked about during podcast 1, is if you're in a serious alcohol or drug situation, we want you to realize first that help is needed, right? We want to teach students how to have that feeling of maybe something's not quite right, or maybe I actually really do need help. So teaching that is a little bit difficult and not super intuitive. So we want to make that a little easier and clear that up. We want students to report, right? If you see something or hear something, or you're just unsure and it looks just odd, right? And you don't think it's very safe, we want you to report. And the way you do that is by calling the tip line at 906-487-0847. And then the third step of using the Good Samaritan Provision is just to wait with that person until help shows up. You don't want to leave them and then something else happens. So you'll either have EMS respond or public safety and police services. So there is a lot of help out there. And I think what we really want to convey through this podcast and the other one that we did is that there is help. And as a university, as a campus community, our administration wants us to be connected and really wants us to look out for one another and help one another. Even if that means calling public safety, having to work with Laura's office. You may have to work with my office, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. Yes, there's a process, which they're going to talk about, and there's questions they need to ask because they need to gather information, but it doesn't necessarily mean that this is a negative mark on your record or something that is sort of a punishment. So the process is really what we want to talk about today, and I think Laura and Ryan are going to do a fantastic job with outlining that.
And it's especially important, I feel, in potentially high-stress situations let me rephrase that. In potentially high-stress situations where the Good Samaritan Provision would be applicable, it's important to know what your options are ahead of time so that you don't panic when the situation actually rises, and you can remain calm and collected and know exactly what to do. So providing people with the information ahead of time and making people aware of what they can do during the situation is vital to the process.
I think calmness is a virtue. I don't have that all the time, and that's okay. But I think when you're when you're in situations where there's an emergency or it's a more emergent of a situation, I think taking a deep breath and really thinking about what you have happening, and that can be for a lot of things, right? Okay, now what do I do? There's always that second to talk through something. Do I really call? Well, why am I thinking about it? Maybe I need to call, right? Okay, so then you think about who's responding, right? What is that going to look like, right? There could be lights, there could not be lights, there could be people asking questions, they probably will have a mask on, like kind of walk yourself through the process. And I'm really hoping that Ryan and Laura talk a little bit about what process they're involved in at each time, just so the listener, the student community can really put themselves in that situation. So if they ever have to use the Good Samaritan provision, that they can just remain calm and be confident in using it. Like our goal is to empower our student community to look out for one another and use this provision.
Yeah, I think Whitney pretty much, that was great summing it up. The thing to remember too is there's no black and white answer to how the situation will unfold, or like what Whitney was saying, there's so many different scenarios in should I call or should I not call. I think the main thing is if for whatever reason it crosses your mind that maybe you should be calling for help, then you should probably do it, because that's coming across for some reason, something, is going on where you don't feel safe or the situation's evolving. As far as how the scenario would play out and how things go, our office usually gets it from, okay, let's say that there's a student that his best friend is coming up, and the student's already here, and his best friend comes up to visit for the weekend, and he gets really drunk, right? And he told his parents and everybody that he would look after him. And now his best friend is laying on the ground. He's got that white pale look on his face. He's already emotional because he's laying on the ground, and he looks unresponsive. And now he's thinking, I told his parents and his friends back home that I'm going to take care of him, and now I did this, and he feels bad. And not only that, let's say that being a student, you've been drinking too. So this is a scenario that has happened before, and now all of a sudden it's this contemplation. How do I go about this? Am I going to call for help? And basically you're worried about getting in trouble for a variety of reasons, not only from student conduct, from possible action by public safety.
And Ryan, we talked a little bit about this in our last episode as well. When you arrive sort of in a situation like one of the ones you were mentioning before or now, what sort of things are you looking for as far as cooperation from people who are there, or how can people be best prepared to assist sort of in a way that would be beneficial to your managing of the situation?
Sure. We're only as good as the information that's provided to us. And I'll say this, that we're getting it from like third or second hand. So you have to think about that too. And just have that in mind, because when you're making a phone call, first off, you have to go through a dispatcher, right? And then that dispatcher is trying to figure out what's going on. Sometimes there's music, people are yelling. Maybe you're really upset. Maybe your best friend's on the ground. He looks like he's passed out. You know what's going on. It's perfectly okay to be emotional. But like what you said, maybe take a deep breath, calm yourself. Try to relay as much information to the dispatch as possible. We've been on some things where we'd have to go to somewhere and it was just the wrong place, So just make sure that you kind of get some of the specifics down. Get as much information as you can, but even then, remember that now we're getting it from the dispatcher. And I'm saying a lot of the times that when we start getting this information, we actually don't know like even half the story as we're making our way there, okay? So we have no idea what led up to, your best friend laying on the ground passed out. We don't know if, how much his past history was, if he's used to drinking, if he's not. So we'll show up on scene with sort of this blank slate. If someone passed out and they've been drinking, that's all we know. So when we show up on a scene, a lot of times we might be going lights and sirens, most likely in a scenario like that, we will. And there's a lot of confusion. We notice with the students as soon as we get there, where everyone will kind of like scatter or move away from like the victim or what's going on. And basically, our biggest thing is to make sure you stay with the victim, like Whitney said, and also just be willing to talk to us. We need to get over there and figure out like some of the steps that led up and what's going on at this scenario. We're not there to all of a sudden get people in trouble and give them MIPs or ticket them or put them in back of a cop car. Absolutely not. We're there. We need to gather information, and it basically the health and well-being of your best friend laying on the ground is what we are worried at that specific time. So When we get there and we start asking for IDs and stuff and M numbers, don't feel afraid to give that information to any of us. Basically, we just need that for reporting purposes. Every time we make contact with someone, it's all documented, you know, and everything like that. So just don't run away. We've had that happen before. Stay there. Help us out. You know, we might need you to help lift the person up or to put them in recovery position or something like that. You know, you guys, whoever's there is literally the first responder. You know, they call us first responders, but you know, that when you're calling for help, you're doing a good thing. When you're using the Good Samaritan provision, you're taking a step above. You're being very responsible, and you're taking charge of a situation that, for whatever reason, you felt got under, didn't go under or went out of control. And it doesn't matter how it went under control at that point. All you know is people need help, and that's the main thing.
I think it's really great to always just remember what public safety is for our campus community, right? They're responding to something because they were called from the dispatcher, right? To respond to something in a more emergent way. So they are probably going to be moving quicker. They are probably going to just arrive and start asking questions. So I think it's just really important, though, to listen to what Ryan was saying and really think about, what is their goal, though? Their goal is to keep our campus community safe. So they're doing their job. And if we can stay calm as a community and help them, and as a student who's calling for another student, if you can just stay calm and confident that, again, what Ryan said, you are doing the right thing and you are taking the step up and calling for your friend and getting help because you could save their life. That is something that we really just want you to have confidence in and know that we're here to help you, all of us. Laura is going to say her part too. Like, we're all here to help you and make sure that you and your friend are safe. Like that is our main job as employees of the university. So just be confident in calling and receiving help.
Yeah, absolutely. Whitney, I mean, that's perfect. And you just got to realize public safety, it's in our name. So when we get there, we're not looking automatically to take enforcement action on things. We're there for whatever victim is there, you know, and that doesn't mean they have to be passed out. It could be any scenario. The victim-centered policing, if you want to call it, or whatever you want to say, it's very victim-centered what we're looking for. We're here to make sure everybody's safe to begin with. And then we'll go from there. We might just have to gather a little bit more information. But safety is the biggest part of it.
Laura, I'd like to use this as sort of a jumping point to you now. Nice to have you here, by the way, because you can offer sort of a third perspective on this whole process and sort of clear up a couple of blind spots. So in the interest of keeping in line with sort of what Ryan was talking about limited information, what sort of stuff do you get in the Office of Academic and Community Conduct, and what does your role in the process sort of look like based on what you receive?
Yeah, so typically in these situations, we're going off of police reports, actually. So once Ryan or another officer responds, they have to write a pretty lengthy report, which involves everybody's information in it. And that's part of the reason that, they're looking for everybody's M numbers and names, and super important not to give fake names so you don't end up in additional trouble. But then they send that over to us and we review it. And I always, this is going to sound funny, but get super excited when I notice that another student has called on behalf of another student, right? And because that means that the Good Samaritan provision is working. It means that our students know and have, strong values of making sure that our community is safe and they're looking out for one another. So, after that report, I call those students in and we have a conversation and we talk about, what's going on, what happened that night. Our approach in the conduct offices is very educational based. And so we don't want to be punitive. We're not looking to then send information back to public safety for them to write tickets or send it over to the prosecutor. We're looking for really good conversation that's educational and reflective, right? So thinking back to that night, why were we drinking, right? Are we drinking because we're super stressed about classes? Do we have roommate conflicts going on? Are there other friendships that we're struggling with, relationship problems? What's the cause to that behavior? So that then we can provide resources and really kind of unpack the why in the behavior. And so is that making referrals to counseling if we're finding that we're drinking every single day or binge drinking every single weekend? Or, is it a referral to Whitney's office to start thinking about healthier decision making? Is it a conversation with public safety about how maybe we weren't the most supportive in a situation, right? We're really, instead of staying and helping public safety, we were almost in their way because we were super nervous and anxious, right? So that educational approach for us is super important. And so when you're using the Good Samaritan provision, or when it applies, that's the approach that we're always going to take, is that educational reflective opportunity. In addition to that, we're always going to offer you the opportunity to talk with the people who have been involved and impacted. And so it gives you the chance to get some closure and have some difficult conversations that maybe you're not comfortable having without the support of our office, or, someone there to help guide that conversation. So, that chance to tell your friend that you really apologize for getting that intoxicated, or using too many drugs that sent you to the emergency room, and you're sorry that you scared them, right? At the same time, it allows you to hear how you impacted them. And then we talk about, how are we going to repair those harms, and how are we going to address, your ability to be successful on campus. So there's a lot of different approaches that we take. And like Ryan said, no situation is black and white, no situation's the same, but it's student focused, and you're going to be in the driver's seat in terms of, how many resources we can provide you with, and what that support's going to look like.
I think there's a big element there, as you mentioned, of that maybe isn't necessarily recognized a lot in these scenarios, is that you have control, or you have choices as far as what you want to do moving forward, as far as sort of the repair process goes after everything's been said and done. It's not just, we're going in this direction and you have to follow along. It's, hey, what can we do to support you and help you on the path to sort of making amends for the situation and moving forward from it in a healthy manner.
Yeah, exactly.
I think something that's so important to take away here, I think the negative part that people look at with calling for help is that you are going to have to talk to someone at some point, right? Like you're going to have to talk to Ryan or an officer. You're going to have to talk to Laura or somebody in her office. You may have to talk to me. But I think the great part about this is the Good Samaritan provision doesn't mean you call and run and, someone will just find them and then help them. No, you call and you're helping them, and it's the whole process, right? Because that wouldn't be closing the circle, right? If you just called and ran, that wouldn't be learning more about the whole situation. And I think this is some of the hardest parts about being an adult, right? Now that you're in college, you are an adult, and these are very adult conversations and decisions that you're making. That is going to be a growing and learning experience. And sometimes learning is a little bit painful or tough, but you are going to have to talk to somebody. And I think what a great learning opportunity, because while I hope you don't find yourself in a situation where you're going to have to call for help all the time because you're in these unsafe or high risk situations, at some point in your life in the future, you probably will have to call for help. And this is almost like practice. I always say that college is a great time to have some of these experiences and practice this, because you have people like Ryan and Laura that will walk you through the process, and they're nice, right? Sometimes nice people aren't that common. And especially if you're nervous, you don't really know how the situation's going to play out, and you don't really know what to do next, they can walk you through it and help you. So I think the whole experience, while it could look at as uncomfortable, of course, right? Because sometimes being an adult is uncomfortable. There are being an adult is loaded with being uncomfortable. That's just part of it. But I just think that the opportunity is so awesome, where you could potentially save somebody's life or better their life, and then learn through that experience and have the whole thing, right? Having that awareness of, how did that make my friend feel? That I scared them because I drank too much, or like, I think sometimes being aware of what others are feeling and how you impacted that is some of the most powerful thing that you could ever gain. I just think it's such a great process.
Yeah, and sometimes those are the most difficult conversations to have, right? Because you don't really want to, I don't want to know that I scared you, and I don't want to know that I upset you or that you're mad at me. But the only way that we're going to maintain a healthy friendship is that you have that opportunity to tell that, say that to me. And I think that conflict is really tricky, and it doesn't go away after college. It really only gets worse, right? And so practicing those conflict resolution skills now in a safe environment with our staff as we kind of unpack things. Like there's no better time to practice those things. So I totally agree with you, Whitney, that this is the time to work on those conflict skills, building relationships, amending relationships, but also taking a step back and reflecting, how did we get here? What caused us to have to use this Good Samaritan provision? Because sometimes it's just a wild, crazy night and that's it. But sometimes there's a lot more that led up to that. And so we don't want to ignore those things. And looking in the mirror sometimes is the most difficult thing. But this is a safe place to do that with plenty of support by numerous people in numerous offices to allow you to have that growth.
Yeah, if I could just piggyback off both of you guys, I mean, that was perfect. And then Whitney, like you said, something that's very powerful. So being a law enforcement officer in the state of Michigan, so all of us here are public safety. We have a license to operate as a police officer anywhere in Michigan, depending on where you're deputized, but we could work anywhere. And we're given the ultimate authority, right? You can literally take away someone's freedom, seizure. You can put them in the back of a patrol car and everything. And I've been doing law enforcement for about 12 years, 8 years in the federal system. And I've had the opportunity to do that so many times. And Laura's office and being a part of some of those round circles and being a part of those discussions, I just think is way more powerful. And to me, it's impacted me way more than everything else that I've done in terms of law enforcement, like enforcing the law, and here's a ticket, and here's this arrest procedure. Sitting down and just having that discussion, I think, is very powerful. And I think everyone that does it and volunteers to go there, the people that were affected, and including the person that, is responsible, it's such a big undertaking and responsibility that you can't help but to look at them when you get there and just be like, thank you for coming here. This is something tough, to do, to step up and say, yeah, I kind of screwed up or messed up here. I want to fix this, and to face some of these people, it's tough. And then when we get there too, we get more of the backstory, right, in law enforcement. So I only seen the scene from when I got there, and I might have got some little bit of information, but now I start to, as Laura starts to go through, and I can start hearing, how things led up, and it puts a whole new perspective on things. And yeah, I just think it's an awesome process.
And hopefully much more beneficial to the people involved than paying a ticket, right? Like who's got spare money to just throw, to the city and say, here you go, here's my ticket. What benefit do they get from that other than that they don't have to talk about it, because it is a difficult conversation. So we're always super grateful that our public safety and police services office is willing to participate in those conversations, and they don't hand out MIPs compared to some other schools, because they know that, again, that's not really beneficial or educational for the student. And so thanks to them, they kind of make you go through our process.
I think it's really, really great that, again, to shine some light on the great teams and the great groups of people we have working here. At other institutions, as Laura was kind of saying before, that maybe their public safety teams, they aren't as great, right? Maybe they're in the business more of handing out tickets and paying fines, and that's how they educate. And that's their deal to figure out. But we do it a little bit differently here, and we want to oftentimes take the longer process, right? It's not as quick as handing out a ticket, but you're gonna learn loads more. And I think it just speaks volumes to what kind of people work here. I've worked with Laura and Ryan for a long time, and I can tell you without a doubt that we all really, the best parts of our jobs are talking to the students. That's what we love to do. We have day-to-day things that keep us going too, but we really get geeked out when we get to talk to students and help them. That's what we love to do. And I can tell you that when we're not working, we're thinking about work, and we're thinking about ways to keep the community safe, right? Like, oh, I hope they're not high-risk drinking. I hope they're not binge drinking. Gosh, I hope they're okay. Like, for heaven's sakes, it's like we all have like 7,000 kids, and we always got to be thinking about them. So I think it just really, really speaks volumes to the people we have here, that they really do care. And while at other institutions, it may be a little different. I've been doing Good Samaritan work for a few years now, and at other institutions, they put a limit on how many times you can use the Good Samaritan provision. And I'm like, oh my goodness, that's almost kind of scary to think about, right? Like, oh, but you only get 2 times this semester to use it, so make them count. but not at Michigan Tech. It's just like, no, if you see a problem and you need help, just call, because we're coming. Like it's just, I don't know, I get almost goosebumps thinking about the ways that our staff and faculty can serve our students. It's great.
Okay, I was just gonna say it's consuming, right? Like you drive down the street during Halloween or Winter Carnival, and you're like, man, if they are binge drinking or if they are going a little too hard, you really hope they know about the Good Samaritan provision, right? Or you really hope that there's somebody there that will, thinking about the bystander effect, right? Like the more people there, the less somebody is to actually call and get help. And so you hope that there's that one person in the room or in that house or wherever that's like, no, this is a problem and we've got to call. Because I'd much rather be having that conversation than, us sending an email saying that a student passed away or is in the hospital because, we didn't do enough, in a certain situation. So yeah, it is totally consuming. You're constantly thinking about it. But I have faith that our students are good, they're good students, they make good decisions. And it doesn't just apply to the student that needs the help, right? And I'm sure you've talked about this, it applies to the student that calls too. It also includes organizations, which I think sometimes we forget about because we're so focused on the one student. But we talk about organizational conduct too in our office. And so, do the organizations know that if you're hosting a party or you're hosting a social and things get a little bit out of hand, that you can utilize this provision as well? Because again, at the end of the day, the goal is to keep everybody safe. And so utilizing it in every aspect. And there might be times that you get to my office and you're like, well, doesn't the Good Samaritan provision apply? And I might say no, and here's why. It's not like Ryan can show up at the house and all of a sudden, for a noise complaint and everybody runs out with their arms up saying like, Good Samaritan provision applies, right? Like that's not really how it's going to work. And so there could be times where students might have misunderstanding, but that's where we need to make sure we're always doing proper education and outreach to students.
As Laura mentioned, our whole goal here is to help educate students. And as Whitney mentioned as well, one of our goals is to provide some color to a potentially black and white situation or the way that's been viewed in the past. So we're going to outline a scenario for our listeners here. I'm going to read off just a quick couple of sentences. We're going to have Ryan sort of respond to how he would interact with the scene when he arrives, and then we'll hear from Laura and Whitney about their follow-up process and what it looks like for them. So here's the scenario in question. Let's say you walk into a bathroom and you find someone lying on the floor in front of one of the toilets. You nudge them with your foot and you ask if they're okay a few times. You raise your voice and you ask again. What do you do from that situation?
Yeah, so this is a scenario that's pretty common for public safety. So we can start rolling from how we would sort of get on scene and what would happen here. So basically, we're going to get a call from that student, right? If they're going to use this Good Samaritan provision, they're going to tell the dispatcher as much information, as little information as they want. Okay, so we're going to have basically a scenario set up. Okay, they found someone laying in the bathroom. They appear to be unconscious. So that's all we really know. We don't know really who the people are yet. We might have names, but we don't put faces with names yet. So we're going to start rolling. We'll usually call NTU EMS beforehand as we're going to go. However, if it's an off-site, if the person's of age and stuff, NTU EMS might not be called. But in a scenario like this in the dorms, we're usually calling NTU EMS even before we're leaving. So if we get a call, let's say we're in the office, we're telling our dispatcher to call our EMS service. So we got them rolling, and because our NTU EMS is rolling, Mercy Ambulance, so Mercy EMS is also going to be rolling. So anytime our guys get called out, they're automatically covered. So an ambulance will be on its way from the airport. So we'll get there on scene with the limited information we have. We'll walk in. Basically, we're going to be taking a med bag with us. It's about a 70-pound. You'll see a blue bag. It says EMS on the back. It's got everything in there from oxygen to the AED equipment to just everything you might need, in a quick grab bag scenario. So we'll walk in with this big bag. We'll kind of set it down once we get to the scene. We'll actually show, hey, tell us where it is. Can you show us what's going on? And then just observe them from there. From there, we'll either kind of set them up in a recovery position and start trying to get some some vitals on them. Are they breathing? How do they look? Is there puke? Can we move them over? Get them in a more comfortable position. Are they conscious? Stuff like that. So as we're taking care of them, and we got other officers probably showing up, we probably will get a lot of students showing up too, and RAs and everything else. So they'll be showing up on scene as we're doing all this. So now we got usually a good group of like at least 4 people showing up on scene. So we'll go through some assessments there. If it appears to be just, alcohol related, we'll kind of keep them in a comfortable position. Maybe grab a throw up or a puke bag and get that ready. And we're gonna wait for our EMS, who are all certified EMTs, to show up on scene. They're usually pretty quick, within 3 minutes. So once we're there, we got them stabilized, NTU EMS will usually show up on scene, start taking care of the person. They'll be doing all the vitals, including heart rate and everything like that, the pulsometer and oxygen levels and everything like that. So we'll kind of stand back. We'll then find the person that called for the assist, and we'll try to get a little bit more background information, including if this is alcohol related. We don't know what it is. Are they have other drugs? Maybe this is some sort of allergic reaction. We don't know. So we have no idea, besides maybe some of the common things, the smell, everything like that. So we'll be waiting on scene, and then NTU EMS will make the assessment there, and then Mercy Ambulance will usually show up like at least maybe 5 to 10 minutes later. If the person's unconscious, they're automatically going to the hospital. So they have no say in what's going to happen. We've had people say, hey, I'm his roommate, I'm his friend, can I just stand by with him for the night? And I understand thinking. A lot of people don't want to go because of the money with the ambulance, but at this point, the person's safety and well-being is way more important than anything like that, and way more than any monetary value you can put on it, right? So just by saving them money from going on an ambulance, let's just not even go there. We're going to send them out. And from there, we usually will get a friend or somebody to accompany them up to Portage, and then their parents could be called, just depending on the situation.
I was just saying that there's a lot going on in that situation, and there's many. This sounds like a lot of people. People could be a little bit stressed, but I think again to take a deep breath and just really try to answer questions if you're the person who called and you are able to, and just help complete the picture. I think the better the story is conveyed to the officer, the better the report that can be written, and then that's just better information that Laura has.
Yeah, and then also for the EMS, right? So the more information we can get for what is going on, like I said, it doesn't have to be alcohol related. So just everything in general, from, hey, were you witnessing them? Were you at the party? A lot of times they're, yeah, no, I was at the party with them, and they weren't drinking too much. Maybe had 2 drinks, and we were walking home, and all of a sudden they got really dizzy and they started passing out. Well, that's good to know, because there is drugs getting slipped into alcohol and everything like that. So those are really good things to know, to pass on to the emergency and the first responders.
So I think it's a good thing to kind of highlight, is that Ryan and Laura, you guys don't ask questions because you're trying to pull something out of somebody so you can I'm just making inferences because I know this is what happened. No, you're coming from an area where I don't have the whole story, and I'm asking all the questions so I can have a complete story that I can make the best decisions and keep this person the safest I can.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing to really remember, we were talking before about how the dispatcher uses second and third party information, right? So as the officer, and it might not be me, it could be whoever, they might have a different temperament or whatever when they get there. It is high stress sometimes for other officers too. Where someone's passed out, do they need CPR, AED? We don't know. So the main thing is that safety factor, and try to remain calm, try to help us out. All we really want to do at that point is stabilize a person, make sure they're going to be okay.
And when the report gets to our office, if an RA shows up or professional housing staff shows up, we're also going to get a report from them. So sometimes we're working off of numerous different reports and kind of putting pieces together. In situations like these, usually we notice that a student will go find the RA, and then the RA calls. public safety. And so again, getting second, third hand information. And like Whitney said, we're asking a ton of questions, not because we're looking for that gotcha moment, or now I can get you in trouble for this, this, or this, but just so that we can put all those pieces together and understand the full picture, so that we're making sure, again, that we're providing you with the best resources that you may need. So we'll go through that report, and I'll basically say, here's what the police report says. There's a good chance you didn't read it, or there's a good chance that you don't remember that night, right? If you're in a situation like this, you might remember bits and pieces. And so this is an opportunity for me to share a little bit that I have, so you can also start to put those pieces together. A lot of times in these situations, we notice that students do have little gaps in memory. And so they don't know that they passed out in the bathroom. They thought they made it back to their room, or they didn't know that they walked into the wrong room and scared somebody else, or they never even remember leaving the party, right? And so this is a chance for them to get that full picture too. And then, like we discussed earlier, it's a chance to start asking those questions about the why, right? Why were we drinking so much? So that we can provide those resources. And then in that same meeting, we're going to start to discuss, do you want to talk to the people that were involved in this situation and hear from them, and, also give you the chance to address them in a safe environment. Most students, I don't think, always recognize the number of people that are involved or the number of people that were impacted. They just think, oh, public safety came, and so they, and my RA was there, right? But we don't think about the number of people that noticed the ambulance outside, or we don't think about the number of people who had to watch, the stretcher get pulled in if you had to go to the hospital, and how that impacts a community. Sometimes just the presence of public safety in a building is scary to some students. And so being able to unpack that too, of being kind of the cause for the reason for public safety to need to come in. And so what does it mean in terms of the RA and the person that found you, your roommate who maybe had to stop studying or be woken up to go to the hospital with you? So we start to kind of talk about all those people that were impacted in some way or another. And of course, typically unintentional, right? Like you didn't go out that night thinking, man, I'm really going to screw my roommate's night up and make public safety do their job and have housing get woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning. That's usually not what our goal is, right? When we're trying to go out and have a good time. So this is that opportunity to do that reflection, and then also an opportunity to apologize to them for being woken up at 3 in the morning, or for making public safety do their job, even though that's their job and that's what they're there for. Our actions put them in a situation where they had to respond. And so we like to keep the conversation really as relaxed and informal as possible in these situations, because again, the goal is not to get you in trouble. At this point, you already knew you probably made some mistakes. And so let's talk about those. Let's not talk about, how we're going to get you in trouble, because that's not the end goal.
Yeah, and I guess from my standpoint, I'm excited, like we talked about before, that if students just call in general, right? They have the courage and the confidence to just call when there is help that's needed. And I think I've said this on every podcast, Jason, that we've done together. I think just really looking at people as people, right? Like we have to treat each other kindly and as other human beings, right? So let's just relax and have good conversation and really try to convey good information and a good story to whoever needs it, right? Whether that's Ryan or Laura or myself, and just be calm and just try to treat others as people. Like, yep, it's Ryan's job to respond, but that doesn't mean we have to make it hard by not giving him the answers. Yep, it's Laura's job to look into the police reports and talk to you, and bless her for having some of these difficult situations or conversations, because that's not easy, but she's here to guide you and help you. And my team, we're just like geeked that we can even share the Good Samaritan Provision with everybody, because our goal is that if you know about the Good Samaritan Provision, then if you need it, you'll use it. So I'm really just hopeful that there was some clarity brought onto this whole process that is really life-saving and can be life-saving, but you first have to know that it's available.
Yeah, there was a situation where I was actually driving and came upon some students, right? And actually this happened numerous times. And I asked the students, hey, call public safety, right? Like I encouraged them, use the Good Samaritan provision. And they were like, no, we don't want to get them in trouble. And that's the typical response that we get, right? That's what everybody's fear is trouble or money, right? And I get it, right? We've all been in college. We've all made probably some poor decisions in our life as well to some extent. And so we know that students don't want to get in trouble, but we also know that our students don't want to mourn somebody, right? Or go through the grieving process like that because of a decision that they didn't make. And so, we always keep that in mind in our office of, to us, you did the right thing, right? You're always going to do the right thing when you call, regardless of the severity. And you might have to get in a fight with that student, right? Like not a physical fight, but like an argument, right? Of like, they don't want you to call, they're adamant on you not calling, but are they really in the state of mind to be making that decision? And so that's where sometimes you've just got to step in and say, I get it. You might be mad at me for a little bit, but your life matters to me, right? And so I'm going to make that phone call to make sure that you're safe, because none of us are qualified to be making those decisions. Like, I'm not a doctor, right? I can't make that determination if someone's safe or not for the night, and nor do I want that responsibility. And so that's why we really want students to know, like, this is what the process does look like. So while you may be afraid to get in trouble, now hopefully you know a little bit about what that process looks like, and so it won't be as scary. You'll just be like, oh, I just have to talk to that person from the conduct office, right? Like, that's okay, I can do that, right? And so hopefully this will bring clarity to all of that.
So as we move towards closing out this episode of the podcast, there's been a lot of good discussion and hopefully a lot of illumination for our listeners about the process. Over the course of this episode and the past episode, there is a resounding message overall. I think that overall we want to help students and we want to help people make sure they're safe. Above all else, your safety matters. And it's important that you know about things like the Good Samaritan Provision so that you can use them and not have to worry necessarily about what is just going to be the end result of me calling for somebody and getting in trouble or having to pay a fine or something like that. Above all else, we're prioritizing your safety. We really want students to recognize that and be confident, like Whitney and Laura said, about their ability to call and their power to call and help somebody out when they're in need. So as we move towards closing out this episode, Whitney, I believe we have we don't have any necessarily announcements this time, but I know we have a couple social things that people can follow on, right?
Yes, so the Center for Student Mental Health and Wellbeing and Public Safety and Police Services, we all have social media accounts. So if you want, be sure to follow us. So this, we will share this podcast and the first one, and then also other information initiatives that we talk about on the Center for Student Mental Health and Wellbeing's social media. So you can look under Michigan Tech Wellness, and we're on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
And it's a great way to stay up to date on things like the Getting Alert on Being TERT presentations, which our scenario came from, actually. Ryan does a fantastic job with those, and I'm sure there's plenty more presentations that are very valuable. So if you're ever looking for ways that you can be involved or learn more about information and processes like this, be sure to follow those social media accounts so you can stay up to date on when that's happening. As we move to close here, any final words from you three as far as words for our listeners? This has been an extended sort of episode over 2 episodes of the podcast here. Any final thoughts or big takeaways we really want our listeners to reinforce?
I think that every time that I've been a part of an MIP situation here, and I think that it's always turned out to be beneficial to everybody on the other end of everything, right? At first it might be a little crazy. Like I said, there's people showing up, police are showing up, EMS, but when it comes back around, I've always, felt that everybody came out of it, much better than what they may have thought and the way it started.
I think just keeping in mind the Michigan Tech values, right? One of them is community, and it's our responsibility to watch out for one another, whether we know them and we're friends with them or they're just another Husky. And so keeping that in mind when you're kind of going about your day, if it looks like somebody needs some help, ask, or if something feels funky, just go ahead and call public safety. That's what they're there for. And that's what our office is there for, is to help and support you. And so you've got power in the choices that you make. And at the same time, your inactions have consequences too. And so just kind of weighing those and making the best decision that you can.
Awesome. I appreciate all 3 of you joining me today. Above all else, thank you for listening. Be sure to stay safe, wash your hands, and most importantly, be kind to each other. Thanks for listening.